Okay, firstly a quick warning. I'm not really talking much about SEO or content marketing. When Joe asked me to speak, I thought it was actually a really good opportunity to talk about something that I've never really spoken about so much, and that's more the entrepreneurship side of running an agency. And basically I've spoken quite a lot about SEO and content marketing recently, so I wanted to mix it up and do something different. So I realised I've been doing SEO for 10 years now, and it started off, I didn't even realise it was SEO at the time. So I worked on a placement year at a web design agency in 2003, and I wasn't particularly good at web design, wasn't very good at web development, and they had some clients who wanted to do some web optimization stuff, or whatever they called it back then. And they decided that because no one knew anything about it, and because I as a student wasn't particularly good at web development, they might as well move me into a role where I can do SEO instead. And to me, that was actually a really good learning curve. It was like basically brand new. I was going out and learning about stuff that I hadn't really heard of before, and not many people within the industry had either, because it was a very new industry. So I had a year of doing this in a web design agency. I worked with someone who some guys might know, Steve Johnson, and he's an SEO consultant. He calls himself a Google consultant. He worked at Domino Systems, the same web design agency I was at in Oxfordshire. And yeah, so I learnt a lot off of him. I went back to uni, and a bit of student knowledge, a bit of SEO knowledge, a bit of affiliate knowledge, and being a student combined is quite dangerous, because they gave me a .ac.uk web space, and with that I then basically created a lot of content on their site. So I did a project. It was a uni project. It was I was at Oxford Brookes. It was an Oxford driving school. I managed to get that to #1 for Oxford driving school, and I really pissed off everyone at Oxford Brookes, because I overloaded them with inquiries for people thinking we were a real driving school. And basically to make them happy, I decided to get rid of the form, and I switched it for AdSense instead. So I managed to get lots of beer money through doing that. I became a web developer once graduated, and again, that definitely confirmed that web development wasn't for me. I kind of got a background in that area, but it wasn't really something I was interested in. And in fact, when I quit my job, I was actually earning more through affiliate marketing as a side job, because that was what my passion really was. So quit my job in 2006 and went to Australia. And rather than just being a freelance consultant, I decided to set up a website to make me look like a company. So I registered seoptimize.com and started working with some clients in the UK who thought I just worked weird time zones. And then, yeah, got some clients in Australia. And by the time I come back, I hadn't really thought of this. I've never considered myself to be an entrepreneur. To be honest, that sounds more like a word that unemployed people use. But I think, to me, it's more about kind of just kind of ending up in that role in a lot of ways. And I found something that I was good at. I come back in 2007 and teamed up with a business partner to turn SEO Optimize into an agency. So we opened an office in Oxford and grew the company quite considerably. And this was based largely on the back of a strong reputation. So the blogging that I was doing back in probably 2005, even before I went to Australia, was starting to pay off, because I was writing about what I was learning at the time, and I figured out lots of other people were interested in learning the same things at the same time. So I had my first speaking gig at SMX London in 2010, which again helped to build the reputation of the company. And last year I founded Quaturo as a content marketing agency, and later teamed up with Blue Glass. Just to go into this, so I would say the early years of SEO for me, working at Domino Systems as a student and working alongside Steve Johnson, who, I don't know if you've read this book, 50 Ways to Make Google Love Your Website. He's basically on Dragon's Den a while ago, and yeah, built up a strong name for himself as a Google consultant. But learning under these people was absolutely invaluable. And this is the first website I ever worked on, and it was so embarrassing. I basically got, the MD of this company is quite a strange guy, and he had some crazy ideas, and like, I've seen his Google AdSense account a few times, and might be crazy ideas, but he earns a hell of a lot of money out of it. And he basically sent me this in a Word doc, asked me to change it into HTML and optimize it for the web. So that's what I did, and I was sat first couple of weeks in this web design company as a student, open plan office with this on the screen and everyone walking past me. And so I optimized it for search, and I checked this last week. I kind of forgot all about this. It's still number 3 in Google today for penis enlargement seminar, so kind of proves what worked back then still works now. It's quite worrying. Anyway, my presentation's really going to look at kind of what advice I would give to myself from 10 years ago, and it's not so much regrets, it's more that everyone learns from experience and kind of just looking back over where I think I've improved myself, kind of from a professional development side, more than SEO in a lot of ways. So I think one of the biggest things I've learned is actually how to manage time and how to get things done. So if anyone gets a chance to watch this from David Allen, a GTD, Getting Things Done video, he did a workshop seminar at Google, and it's well worth watching because it's just about prioritizing your time and doing what's most important. And it's basically about learning to block out distractions. So I use this Procrastinator Chrome plugin, and I find that works really well because even if I want to go to Facebook or liverpoolfc.com or whatever it is, so during a certain time of the day, it just won't let me do that because it's not really important to what I'm doing. Don't wait till lunch, do it after work, it's fine. But it just makes you focus on what's important and avoids distractions. And that's kind of the main thing. It's not really figuring out so much as what's important. A lot of the time it's figuring out what to say no to. And I've also found it useful to read books for inspiration. So I've been reading quite a lot for the last few years, and I always find that actually shutting off away from a laptop and the internet, and it triggers new ideas that you just wouldn't have thought of otherwise. So it's always really useful just to get a different perspective. And I would suggest don't read about SEO. Kind of, we get enough SEO from blogs and conferences, and try and just broaden the approach you're having. Read about something else, and it will probably trigger an idea that then relates back to what you're doing. Trying to make time to relax is important as well. And I really like this quote that the time to relax is when you don't have time for it, which I think is very true because otherwise, in this industry especially, stupid hours that everyone works, you find that it's quite easy to get burnt out, and actually you probably need to take a step back and slow down sometimes rather than trying to get everything done, because we need to be sharp. We need to make sure that if we're doing SEO strategy, we're thinking on top of our game. Same with content ideation. You can't do that if you're feeling knackered. You need to really be on top of your game for that sort of thing. Another thing is finishing one task is much better than starting 10. So again, it's great to have really good ideas, but if you don't follow through on any of them, it's wasted really. So it's kind of, again, that's prioritization. You figure out what the ideas are and then go away and finish that task. Make sure you're working towards something that actually gets achieved. And also, I think this is very important, is to figure out what you do best and to focus on it. So if there's something that you're not good at, you've probably tried it, but it's just not for you, then maybe just face it, that's not what you're good at. Try and figure out what it is that you excel at, and do the same for your team. Try and figure out people in your team, what are they best at? So it's not being negative in the sense that they're weak here and here. It's actually thinking about what do you need in terms of an output and who's best in those particular roles. And then hire people for the stuff that you're not good at. Hopefully it's not this, but if you can figure out what it is, that basically says, for those at the back, which of the following is the largest? A peanut, the moon, an elephant, or a kettle? Hopefully it's not a tricky one. But yeah, hire those people to fill the gaps that you have in your team. Also, a good working environment and culture is very important. Like, you obviously want everyone to be enjoying the jobs that they're doing. They need to be kind of just challenged, basically, so that they're doing things and they're doing it in a good environment where they're enjoying themselves and having fun. That's important, but sometimes I think it's almost overlooked. I think the most motivating factor is actually a clear company vision. I find that's far more powerful, because like, you can talk about the seats that you have in your office, the lunch that you provide for your team, but if you don't have this, then it's, again, like, that's far more important to keep people happy longer term. Also, understand what projects and circumstances your team performs best under and enjoys. Again, this comes from experience. If you're taking on clients that you think, oh, that's really good, they're paying a large amount per month, you're doing well out of that, but your team has no interest in that client, they're never going to get the best results for them. So that's when you kind of learn, actually, what are we good at? How can we get the best out of our team? Be more selective over who we take on, and then you know that when you're taking on a new client, you can be pretty sure that you're going to get good results out of it, because you know your team's going to be really excited about working with this new brand. So the first step really is to kind of figure out what it is you want to achieve. And once you've thought about that, it kind of sounds basic, but a lot of people kind of miss that point. And once you do, it's then much easier to be selective. So if you know what you want to achieve, you also know what you want to say no to, so you can turn down the projects that don't really suit what you're looking to get out of it. And lead by example, I wouldn't really suggest doing anything that David Brent would do, but lead by example to get the ideas on board. I found this really useful in the past. If I want to get people in my team blogging, people speaking, if I'm not doing it myself, it's a real challenge to get anyone else to do it. Whereas if I'm out there and I'm showing that I value this because I'm doing it myself, it's really important, it's much easier to get that message across. And another thing I think I've learned is that you can't always please everyone. Like, no matter what you do, there's going to be decisions that just people won't agree with. Like, if you show a red card to Nani in the Madrid-Man United game, 51% think he should get sent off, 49% say he shouldn't. There's no right or wrong answer. In fact, there's kind of two wrong answers there. He can't win. And based on that, you need to think about just what's right for your company. Sometimes it won't please everyone, but you need to stick to what's important, because, again, you might make one person happy, but then annoy someone else. So it's sticking to what you believe in and being confident in those choices. And hiring the right people is hugely important as well. So you want to make sure that you've got someone that you want to make sure he's the right person, he's there for a long time, and he'll stick around. And exactly, you don't want him to quit. and it's really difficult. This is you only get this from experience. Like, me telling you to hire the right people is like, that doesn't mean you're going to choose the right person. You need to know what to look for, and a lot of the time you actually need to figure out what not to look for in order to find out who's good. So it's learning from mistakes. Not everyone will get every hire they make right, and it's figuring out who's the right fit but also who's the wrong fit, because if you have people in your team who are wrong, that affects your whole team, not just that one person. So it's really kind of learning from experience with that. So basically, you want to surround yourself with talent. You don't want to be the only person who can do a large amount of things in your company. If you've got people who are really talented in all areas, that just makes life a lot easier, because then you've got a lot more to fall back on. I'd also say get everyone else involved. So we kind of, Blue Glass, ditch the silos, and we don't really have an SEO team, a social team, a paid search team. We put them all in together, so they're working together on the same accounts, and when they get to work on the same clients, obviously they're sharing that information. Same with outreach and content production. That's not two different teams, it's the same people. Or not the same people, it's two different people but in the same team. So they're sharing that knowledge. You're not just creating content and then trying to do outreach. You're actually thinking about outreach before you get that content even created. So then you know that it's the right idea to get it placed and you can improve the quality of the publications that you get it placed on. So getting everyone involved in the same team's important, and celebrating success as well. They need to know what it is that they've done that's good, because then you can do more of it. So celebrating success helps with that, whether it's taking someone for beers or a pub lunch, whatever it is, it's making sure they know that they've done a good job. But you also want to make sure that people are prepared to fail. So failure isn't necessarily a bad thing, and I think if you have that kind of thought within your company, yeah, and he definitely doesn't have an excuse. But basically, if you can learn from your mistakes, then it makes it easier. You're then basically learning what not to do the next time. And it shows that you're not always taking the safe bet. You're prepared to fail. Because if you have, say you have 5 content campaigns and even 3 of them fail, but 2 of them are big successes, there's a good chance that's going to be much better than having 5 safe bets that might do okay. So actually it's changing that mentality and just making sure that you don't really make the same mistake twice, so learning from that. It's also hugely important to keep learning and improving. So one thing I've done across probably more the last 6 years is attending different conferences, going over to the US, speaking at different events and blogging. And by doing that and being actively involved, I basically need to know what I'm talking about, because otherwise people are going to notice very quickly. So by staying ahead of your game and staying involved in what you're doing, that's hugely important in this industry, because everything changes every week, every day. And it's also important to realise that no one's going to be an expert at first. It takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of hard work, and it's not just reading a book and going away with it. It's actually kind of getting your hands dirty and learning that's really going to get that message across. And I really like this quote from Nelson Mandela: it always seems impossible until it's done. And I remember someone saying, like, for every person who says I can't, I can show you like another 6 or 7 who've actually gone and done that thing. And I think that's very true. It's just a lot of time it's about attitude and just working hard to achieve something. Public speaking as well is important. It's something that I never wanted to do, and it was kind of very new to me at first. But at the same time, it's very important for your company to raise a profile. Rand Fishkin did a presentation at Distilled's Link Love last week about how it's important as the CEO to show that you're kind of on top of your game, you're the person to go to. It's really important both internally, but obviously from a reputation point of view for your company as well. Also, you need to take a step back and analyse what really works. So I think this is hugely important. If you're doing something wrong and you're carrying on doing the same thing wrong, you're just going to carry on making the same mistakes. So actually figure out what it is that works for you, and then if it's working well, that's something you want to do more of. If it's something that doesn't work for you, then don't do it again. It makes sense that you really want to learn from those mistakes and do less of it, or in this case, never do it again. Building industry relationships is hugely important as well. This is the Blue Glass event we ran at SES London, and by actually getting out there and meeting people, you're going to build relationships that there's no way you can do. Like, Twitter's great, but getting out there and meeting people and sharing a pint or whatever it is, it's much more valuable in terms of building those long-term relationships. Basically, the reason for that is because people trust people. People will make recommendations, word-of-mouth referrals. Happy clients are basically going to send you more business. It's not just about keeping them happy as a client themselves, but if you can then, this example here, there's a couple of our clients in here who, this is the perfect marketing for us, because we've got our clients telling potential new clients how good we are. And if we say it, it's like, of course we're going to say that, but if we've got people there who we've got really good results for, then that speaks for itself. Also means we need to get good results as well. But yeah, people trust people. This is from the first presentation I did at SMX, and nothing's really changed. So he basically said, people recommend recommendations from people who you know are trusted by 90% of people. And I think Google was somewhere in like 38%. Yeah, search engine ads 41%. So my prediction back then, this is 2010, was that means people are going to trust recommendations from social, from Twitter, much more because it's personal than they will from search results. And if you look at how personalised and how social Google's become, then that makes a lot of sense. And to me, again, focusing on these key people you can influence is where you're going to grow client relationships, you're going to grow a blogger outreach network. It doesn't matter what it is, it's really going to help you in terms of just scaling things up, basically. And another thing is it's all about realistic expectations. If you can expect, your client knows what to expect from day one, that's going to make it a lot easier. So it's always best to under-promise and then over-deliver, as opposed to just having, say, a salesperson who can say, yeah, we can do this, this, and this, and then causing problems 2 or 3 weeks later because actually you really can't. And again, I think everyone probably learns from mistakes with this. No one's going to have 100% happy clients, everything's running smoothly at all times, but you realise that when the mistakes are made, it's quite often to do with expectations. I remember a couple of years ago, I had a client who we spoke to, and we didn't really get very good results for them, and they weren't happy. They were, quite rightly, they weren't happy because the results weren't there. And I spoke to them, and my response to them was, yeah, to be honest, the results aren't really what I expected either. This is what we planned, this is how we wanted to get you there, but it hasn't worked out as we expected. And that really reassured them, because rather than just saying like what they've heard previously, which was, oh yeah, everything's going well, then that's where you get into the kind of conflict. It's like the agency's underperforming, a client's not happy, and then they just end up parting ways. Whereas if you can just admit that actually what you're doing hasn't worked as well as what you'd hoped, you're kind of more on their side that way, and you can say, this didn't work, but this is what we're doing to fix it. And straight away, again, you're approaching it, it's more as a partnership with your client, so you're looking at things from exactly the same way, because quite often if the agency thinks they're right, they've done a good job, and the client thinks they're wrong, they've done a bad job, there's only one opinion that matters there, and it's the client, so you might as well kind of be on their side with it. And also accept that not everything you will do will always go to plan. To be honest, nothing really goes completely to plan ever, but if you have a plan to fall back on, that makes it much easier, because more for when things go wrong, you know what it is that you need to do to get things back on track. And the client-agency relationships need trust and have to be win-win for long-term success. I think that's a big point that I've kind of learned from experience as well, is you can't just say yes to everything and hope that it's going to work. If you accept a client that perhaps you just want to win them because it's a good client name, that's not going to be win-win, and it's not going to work long-term. You'll probably get some short-term results from them, and you'll get their name on your client list, but actually if the agency isn't making a profit, which again a lot of people kind of decide not to think about or not to mention, to me that's really important. The agency needs to be doing well out of it, and the client needs to be doing even better out of it. And if it's win-win, that's where you get the clients. Like I've worked with a client, Audley Travel in Oxford, since 2007, and it's based on that relationship that we know what we're doing for them is fair on our side, and it's getting them great results. If it wasn't that way around, then we wouldn't be prioritising things internally to get a good job done. And kind of sounds wrong, but that's just actually how things happen. And get to know your team and clients outside of work. So the more you can get to know people and like just share a beer with a client after a meeting, or invite them to an event, so get them nominated for an award's normally good if you can take them along to something like that. Then you can really build a relationship outside of that makes it much easier, because once you've got that trust, as soon as you start to do things wrong, then they're going to tell you, and they're going to be open and honest about it. They're not just going to straight away fire you. And the same with your clients, if they're your team even. If they're unhappy, you want to figure out why they're unhappy. So speak to them outside of the office and figure out what it is you can do to improve how things are running in the office. I've also found that working with a smaller set of close relationship clients is far more rewarding. So if you look to if you're always focusing on the next client win, it's probably not the best thing to be focusing on. If you could actually focus on how do you do a better job with your existing set of clients, you can make those relationships much stronger, and a lot of the time that probably means much bigger new business opportunities than what you'd have if you were actively looking for it. And honesty and transparency is really appreciated when it's not what want people to hear, when it's not always what people want to hear as well. So I really like the quote that you don't have to remember what you said to someone if you just told the truth. And it's very true. You just dig yourself into holes if you're getting into those situations. Something else that's important, especially within this industry, is to be surprised. But to be honest, these days, of anything that happens, I'm never completely shocked, and chaos is kind of part of our job, to be honest. Like, everything changes all the time, and like Chris Winfield in the US is always quoted as saying, the only constant is change, and it's true. Like, everything will change all the time. That's why we love this industry. So actually, like, be surprised by things, but yeah, don't be too surprised. And this is almost saying ignore everything I've said, because you need to make this work for you. Like, what I've said isn't this is a guide to what's going to make everyone kind of improve what they're doing for their jobs. It's just kind of, this is what I've learned from over the last 10 years, but it has to be specific to you, and it might involve tough decisions that you don't want to make, but actually longer term it's the best thing to do. And finally, and I think most importantly, is to enjoy it. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, there's something wrong. So it's never going to work long term again. So figure out what it is you're good at, figure out what kind of environment you enjoy working in, and then that's what you want to make happen. Okay, thanks very much. And I think we've got a few minutes left for questions as well. Yep. Two things. The first one was that I didn't really like what I was doing. I was doing web development stuff that it was interesting. It was for big retail brands, but it wasn't really for me in terms of the job role. Like, the people and the company were great, but the job role wasn't good. And the second thing is what I'd seen from my early experience of SEO and affiliate marketing was what I was spending more time on outside of work rather than my own job. And due to the fact that I was actually doing pretty well out of that, it made it a lot easier to work, to quit my job and then work for myself, basically. Yeah, I think one thing we've learnt from mistakes, again, is actually hiring internal writers is very tough. Like, it's okay if you're a niche agency and you just focus on, say, like what Lisa was talking about earlier with fashion. If you've got fashion writers and all they work on is fashion, that's perfect. If you then try and get them to talk about finance afterwards, because that's one of your other clients, like, they'll try their best. They're good at copywriting, but they're not an expert. So actually, it's reaching out. So maybe looking for different, more niche knowledge. So what it is you're talking about, as opposed to a PR background or an SEO background. It's actually figuring out how much do they know about that particular industry. Especially with authorship and everything else where things seems to be heading. If you want to be an expert within a particular niche, then there's no real way of faking that. You have to know what you're talking about. No, it wasn't actually. There was one. There's a photo. It wasn't me stuck in the toilet, but I do have one that's very similar of me with my head stuck in a cat flap when I'm about 3 years old, but I couldn't get hold of it. I was going to get that one there.
Kevin, do you have any tips on people that are working for an agency or client side, and perhaps they're sort of thinking about, oh, I want to set my own business? Do you have any tips for how they could sort of go ahead and start doing that? Going back to what you were saying, you have to sort of know what you're good at and what you're not good at.
Yeah, I think also taking the risk out of it helps a little bit as well. Like my example of going to Australia, I'd already decided I wanted to go to Australia, and I kind of treated it more as a holiday. So if it didn't work and I didn't make that much money, it didn't really matter. So if you can do things where you kind of dip your toe in the water at first, rather than, especially if people have got, say, high-paying jobs at agencies or in-house and they want to go alone, it's not always that easy to make that step. So if you can figure out some stuff that is actually going to set you up in the meantime, like James Carson's probably a good person to ask who's speaking later, because he's done the same thing from Bauer. But yeah, it's just figuring out kind of how you want to get there. And then figuring out what clients you want and what you want to be achieving is really important.
For you, obviously you set up, because you went traveling, but would you recommend perhaps people doing a stage approach? So maybe if they say, I want to have my own business, so I will save the next, let's say, 3 paychecks,
Yeah.
and then I'm just going to see if I can get more clients at the same time, a little bit on the side, so that no one knows about it, and then I'm just going to, leave.
I think it depends on your employer and what you're doing and how seriously you're taking it. So yeah, it kind of depends on that person really. But yeah, I'd definitely recommend, if you're going to do it, keep your overheads low.
I would say for the other way around. I believe truly that if you don't believe that you'll succeed and you have a backup plan, you're more likely to fail. So when I started, I had no other plan. I quit my job, started my agency, did all the conferences I could, wrote loads of content, did loads of networking, and within the first month I had my first client. And if you can be really invested and really believe what you do, I think you're more likely to do it. Not that it's the only way, but it just kind of depends on the person you are. But I would never have a plan B, because that's kind of like saying plan A might not work.
Yeah. So you just have to have a lot of confidence to go out.
Yeah. Like you want to not there is no plan.
Hi, Kevin. You were saying that hiring the right people and surrounding yourself with the right people is the right thing to do. Is there one thing that you look for out of people joining your team? Is there something that stands out that you're always looking for?
It's more about kind of how we feel about them in some ways once they've come in. Like, I've spoken to a lot of people over the phone and they sound good, but a lot of the time that's just because they're saying the right things, and sometimes it could just be that they've kind of read the whole of SEO Moz, and that doesn't necessarily mean they've been out there and done it. And I'm not stating SEO Moz for that. I think it's a great way to learn, but you need to then go out and learn and test things yourself. So it's actually, like, we try to give people a bit of a test over, let's do a mini audit on something and see what you come up with, because then you can get them thinking and just see what thought process they have.
What's the best book you've read to help you with all this? Good to great, I would say, if I had to pick one, is really good. Yeah, just about kind of, yeah, taking it from an average company to what you need to do to stand out, different USPs, and yeah. Awesome.